Hell, so you probably have gotten the hint that I love sports. It's true. I will always try and sneak in as much sports banter as I can on the Masculine podcast. And I do love sports, and that's why I'm so excited about this new documentary film coming out soon called Hurdle. Hurdle is set right in the middle of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and follows young Palestinian men as they use sports as well as creativity to practice their freedom in that world that isn't really exactly free. You can learn more about this exciting documentary at www.hurdlefilm.com. Again, www.hurdlefilm.com. Right now, the Hurdle production team has put on a Kickstarter to cover the last bit of their post-production costs. They need to hire some audio mixers, shout out to Pretty Chris, and colorists. So they've put on this Kickstarter to help cover those costs. The Hurdle team has all of our At the Masculine podcast support, and I know they'd love yours as well. So visit www.hurdlefilm.com/Kickstarter. Again, www.hurdlefilm.com/Kickstarter to support this incredible new documentary film. It's beautiful and powerful, not to mention incredibly an important story right now and can't be told without your support. All right, all. Now it's time for the Masculinity Podcast. Thanks.
Hi guys, my name is Samantha and Remoy.
It's your boy Remoy George Phillip, the first.
And this is Masculinity. So I'm feeling refreshed this week. I'm feeling so refreshed.
You should
now.
be, because France is in the World Cup finals and they look unstoppable.
Right? I mean, there's so many reasons to be grateful this week. There's so many reasons to be grateful.
Yeah, the one reason his
watched
name
with my
is
brother.
Kylian Mbappe.
That's right. You know, I watched it. We watched it actually at a bar at Woodwork in Brooklyn. So you New Yorkers.
Oh, that bar is the soccer bar.
It's the one. And we met this very nice young fellow from England, who was hoping that Belgium would win, but we forgave him and had a beer afterwards. It was fun.
Well, he's probably sad now because England lost yesterday, so it all worked out.
It'll be all right. All right, so let's get into it. You guys, there's been so many things happening, but one of the things that we haven't really talked about the way that we really want to is Terry Crews, and we just really wanted to take an opportunity to talk about what's been happening with Terry Crews for a second. I mean, for those of you who don't know, Terry Crews is a very funny and beautiful actor. But he's not just your everyday actor. He's a former NFL player. And let's just say that he's not small. He's not a tiny guy. In fact, he's a big dude. He was an NFL player for a while. I think he's 6'3", 6'4", buff, works out 6 times a week.
He's got
shoulders
that just... Yeah, his shoulders are bigger than my head, my whole body. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, he's just, looks like he could, save you in a storm. And you can catch him on Brooklyn Nine-Nine and on those random ass Old Spice commercials. Honestly, if you follow us on social media, you know that we love Terry Crews, a love and support for him, and his speaking out about his own Me Too story has been pretty clear. But we really haven't talked about it on the show. It's been quite limited, so we just really wanted to talk about it today just because there's been so many new updates since the last time. And so much bullshit has happened around the situation that it really bears mentioning. So if you haven't followed the situation, Terry Crews was grabbed at a party by a producer named Adam Bennett.
Can I make a quick aside real quick?
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, okay, for people who don't know, or just need a little bit of context, he wasn't just a producer, he's an agent, and agents are producers because they can make money in movies because of their power and whatever. But if anybody wants to know how powerful agents are and what kind of power Adam Bennett had, read a really cool book called Powerhouse. It's an oral history about one of the biggest agencies, if not the biggest agency, called CAA, which I think Bennett works for now, or at least worked for at some point. It's by James Andrew Miller, and it'll give you some really incredible context about how powerful these agents are And it even gives more context to this situation, how Bennett at a party, who probably in stature compared to Terry doesn't add up or doesn't measure up, but still had the power to do what he did to Terry and have no, worry or fear, or just could, just manhandle Terry without any shame.
Exactly. And one thing that I think a lot of people are getting very confused about is the fact that, despite the fact that he revealed it publicly to the public a year after the assault, Terry Crews actually went and reported this the very next day, right? And I mean, he came out publicly because everything started to happen with the Me Too movement, and he said himself that it was really important for him to actually voice his own experience, right? And what's been really great is that he also spoke at a Senate hearing along with activist Amanda Nguyen, who has an organization specifically dealing with, sexual assault survivors. And, she was a sexual assault survivor. She was raped at Harvard. And they went there and talked about the Sexual Assault Survivors Rights Act, which was passed under the Obama administration in 2016, I believe, which we'll post that again on our social media, and we'll post the whole trial so you can really hear like how about it he is,
Yeah. And what's interesting about this is really the reaction from all men, other men, about what the way Terry went about the whole thing. Like, many people talked about how he should have punched the dude or like broken his jaw. And Terry talked about after, like, and recently, how he said he never would have worked again, and if he had punched Adam or if he had fought him, he would have even never worked again, and how he could just have imagined, the headlines and all the news stories and the Twitter. And, he's spending money on legal fees that he would have spent anyway, which is having a very much more targeted impact. And he's taking an opportunity to point to something, using that situation to stand really with other people's instead of causing more conflict.
And honestly, it's like, I think that we have Donald Trump in the White House right now. A lot of fuckery has happened because of it. So it's surprising to me that with everything that's happened, he's getting so much backlash from so many people, honestly, and also including women. Like, why didn't you hit him? Like, you're big enough to da-da-da. And it's like, it's crazy to me because, like, all the reasons that he cited for not hitting him are things that we know. We're living in an age where Black men, young Black men in particular, but not some not so young, right? The Alton Sterlings and the Eric Garners, who are at that ages, are getting killed with no ramifications whatsoever, for the most part, for police officers, for the people who are handling these shootings. And so for people to have that reaction because it's something sexual, because again, it's all about protecting this like masculine ideal of like what a man should be, what's allowed, right? And like anything that's deemed like another man grabs you, so all of a sudden this notion that what you might be gay because you were assaulted at a party. And what if you were? I mean, but Terry Crews is obviously he's not gay. He's married with a wife, and he's quite an ally of the LGBTQ community as far as I can tell. So he doesn't get anything out of saying this besides literally just changing the conversation around rape culture. And specifically, I would think that a lot of men would be a lot more receptive to this because there's so much assault that goes on that men suffer from that we never hear about specifically because of something like this. So for Terry Crews, 6'4", like NFL player, to come out and say something like this, I think should be nothing but applauded. But somehow the performance of masculinity is far too strong for like guys to actually be like, all right, it was fucked up that you were grabbed. We get why you didn't punch this dude out because you know you could have. And, hopefully like this won't happen again. I don't know. It's just surprising.
I think what you're saying is really crucial in the fact that you're pointing to like the performance of masculinity, which we've been talking about regularly, and how that affects individuals about how they feel they should live and act in the world. But it also maybe more importantly, sets a global expectation of what we think other men should be, right? And we have a strict expectation that becomes like the rubric by which we judge other men's actions, and we either like praise or belittle them for them, right? And in this case, like, you know, Terry Crews, this big black man using an intersectional lens, was like sexually assaulted by a man, and the initial reaction or expectation is, why wouldn't he just punch him? He's a big black man. He would fight. He would be aggressive. Why would he just not hit him and take him down, right? And that expectation was not met. Contrary, it was the complete opposite approach, something that we expect as, you know, soft or maybe even feminine, but not masculine. So he's not only not met our expectation, he's gone into another realm that is an expectation for something on the other end of the binary spectrum, and we just don't know how to deal with that, especially as the American male public who has to see this and who is overreacting to this or reacting in a way that is, you know, unfortunate.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like one of the things that, you know, in terms of like having it's interesting because like that masculine reaction would be for him to punch dude out, right? But like having like a sense of like, not necessarily, I wouldn't say sense of reaction, just using practical means for this situation to end. Because if you had punched dude out, I mean, what's the impact of that, right? I mean, Terry Crews is out here putting himself on the line because he is actually trying to make change. He is wanting to create. He's directly contributing to new context where people are being held accountable for their actions, where men can feel more comfortable coming forward when people do this kind of bullshit. And that is the reaction that is not being masculine, which I think is interesting, right? That like this notion that in order for you to perform, to be masculine, the performance of masculinity has to be rooted in some type of physical, I mean, like physicality, whether that's violence, whether that's intimidation, whether that's, you know, whatever it is, it's always having to do with something physical. And like if you employ other means, conversation, communication, accountability, somehow that's like completely not masculine. And one of the things that I really do want to point out here is that it's very clear that Terry Crews is very invested in making systemic change because we live in a capitalist society. And he has specifically said, you know, I want to hit them where it hurts. Like the wallet is where it hurts, right? Like the money. Like if you are going to lose money because of that, then that's when you know that you've actually made an impact. If a guy gets a broken nose and then he's out, you know, I mean, I don't know how long a broken nose takes to heal, but he's out the next month grabbing other people out of the party, maybe going for somebody a little bit smaller who he doesn't think is going to punch him out. What use is that, you know? So, I mean, and one of the things, too, that's been really disconcerting about this is, I mean, I know probably most of you guys will know who Russell Simmons is. Do you hear that Russell Simmons told him not to say anything? Said that he should, like, yeah, he was like, you should chill out, like, to the effect that he sent him an email. It was like, oh, like, you know, maybe this isn't the thing to go for or something to that effect. Like, maybe you should just let someone go. And Terry Crews said, you know, actually, I think this is in the Breakfast Club interview that we're going to post on the social. Said something like, you and me aren't close. You know, like we're not close like that. I don't know why you're reaching out to me to say something like this because it's not like we have that type of relationship. It's not like we have that type of rapport. And I actually know that you're friends with a lot of these Hollywood, a lot of like these, you know, like in that sector of the industry. So the fact that you're trying to come at me acting like black man to black man, quote unquote, like you're going to come at me on the level and like tell me to do this is honestly, it's gross. Like, it's gross. You should be rooting for me instead of telling me to silence myself, which I think is crazy, you know?
No, agreed. Completely agreed. And there's one expectation for what it is to be a black man, and you are not meeting that. And actually, you're kind of challenging that wholeheartedly. And it obviously, it made Simmons uncomfortable because it challenged those expectations.
Honestly, I don't really know if I would trust Russell Simmons because I think it's pretty clear with, like, with his like brush cars and stuff like that, that he's not really for the Black community in general, because he was inciting a lot of people to use these cars, and then a lot of people fell in debt because of it and all of that. So I'm not really sure that like he's somebody who I would point to as somebody who knows what's best for any community. That he's looking out for himself. And I think in this case, he was looking out for himself and his homies as well.
Let's take a quick break. Again, wanted to remind you one more time about the new documentary film Hurdle. I said earlier it's about sports. The sport is parkour, but it's also about creativity, and that creativity is documentary photography and filmmaking. So in the film, you're transported to Israel, Palestine, and you're watching these young men who practice parkour, and these men who take to the streets and document the complex world around them, all so they can feel a sense of freedom. It's incredibly powerful. And so this powerful film needs your support. So again, head to www.hurdlefilm.com/Kickstarter. www.hurdlefilm.com/Kickstarter to help make this documentary a reality. Help get this powerful story out into the world. Back to the pod.
I mean, really, Terry Crews is an excellent example of why people are super hesitant to come forward. And I'm not saying that he's the only example, because, I mean, I think we remember all of the backlash that everybody who came up against Harvey Weinstein, James Toback, and, you know, all the other people who have been put on blast this year has been a great example. But this is a man who is strong. Right? He's strong. He's physically strong. You can tell that by looking at him. And there's like this thing where there's no possible way that somebody who looks like you, somebody who has the strength that you do, somebody who's as mature as whatever as you, could possibly be going through something like this. And I think that this is something that's key, right? Because we always say that the people, like, is the people that you least expect that might be suffering the most. And in this case, this is like the exact, like this conversation with Terry Crews trumps everything that we understand about masculinity, about strength, and about abuse. And it's super important for us to highlight this, because if Terry Crews comes forward and says something like that, what should happen, in my opinion, is that the floodgates open for people to feel more comfortable, other men feeling more comfortable to come forward, if other strong people, other masculine presenting people to come forward and speak up about the truth. But instead, what's happening is getting all this backlash about how could you, Terry Crews, that this happened? It's a classic case of victim blaming. So there's like this feeling that we're like entitled to know like everything that could have possibly led up to the moment where somebody else grabbed his nuts. I'm like, I'm wondering where the questions are for Adam Bennett. Where are the questions for Adam Bennett? Like, it feels a little bit like he's being, I hesitate to use the term crucified, but obviously it already came out of my mouth, you know, but it's just this notion that we need to know, we're entitled to know everything about somebody so that we can make their experience valid. And it's like, where's the compassion? Where's the compassion? I mean, men's reactions to this make it very clear and obvious why trauma continues to exist for men and why suicide among men is so prevalent.
Yeah,
because something just can happen and he's still being crucified for it.
Yeah, I mean, especially with like the understanding of the things that like men of color go through, black men go through in this country, you know, police violence and everything else. I mean, many black men still made it sound like they would have rather gone to jail and then hold their anger to create like a, you know, a better possible solution for us all. I mean, I think that just speaks again to the expectation and how masculinity is a conditioning that we all subscribe to, whether we like to or not, and how prevalent it is within our identities.
Yeah, and I think like the way that this is playing out is so interesting because it really is like a reinforcement that if the man grabs you, right? And And actually, I'm trying to think if Adam Bennett had been a woman, would what would I mean? The backlash would be probably much worse against Terry Crews, like 100%. And I guess I don't know. Is it just sexual assault that's like just being dismissed, or is it sexual assault by men that's being dismissed? Because I really do think that if it had been a woman who had grabbed them, people would have been even more would have mocked it even more, And so, I do wonder about that. I mean, it's like, you see somebody like 50 Cent who made like crazy homophobic jokes about it, like talking about strap-ons and all kinds of things, and Russell Simmons actually laughing about that shit, which was like kind of, I mean, it was, the whole thing was just so perfectly awful.
Well, I think we live in, I mean, we've talked about this in other podcasts. I think we mentioned this in the Imran Siddiqui episode talking about movies and media. Like we say masculinity and we say patriarchy, but if we look at the root of that comes from white patriarchy and a system of white patriarchy that's been employed for centuries, millennia, so forth. And that system is based on domination. And so we're going to talk about this next episode as well with our guest. Yeah. But the system is made that you have to be in power and feel your power and express your power in domination or dominion over others. And any person or any place you can find that is a better place to climb that ladder into your more perfect, manhood or your more perfect masculinity, right? And that's what we see here. Like, so we've set these parameters about sexuality, and like if a man touches another man, it's homosexual, or if there's any sort of vulnerability or softness there, it's potentially homosexual. And well, homosexuality on our little hierarchy of sexuality or masculinity is seen at the bottom, so we can express dominion over that. And then you see Terry Crews, who's assaulted and doesn't react in a way that is traditional to being a violent, aggressive male or masculine man. Well, then he is deemed as homosexual or queer or soft, and that gives others the opportunity to express their masculine dominion over Terry Crews because of this one incident. And more than anything, that shines a giant spotlight on how the system of patriarchy and masculinity is so prevalent. Again, it's not like to get lost into like the minutia of the actions of Russell Simmons and Terry Crews is one thing, but then to step back and just see it all play out as this reoccurring cycle of masculinity and patriarchy, and just to see how it works is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, your point about domination is key because, we talked last week with Julian Housen about like performing masculinity as women, right? And the performance of femininity. And, we've been very obsessed in society with making that like a binary. But the truth is, if you really sit back and think about what the performance of masculinity is, it's really your ability to dominate any situation. Dominate any person around you, dominate anything around you, to just dominate, right? And domination doesn't always have to be negative, like providing, being the person who brings home the bacon, all of those things, like that can be obviously considered to be something that's very positive, providing for people, making sure everybody's fed. And it's also just being the chief of the house. So, bringing that back to this, I mean, Terry Crews has talked a lot actually about his own notions of masculinity and how he had to check himself. And if you listen to the trial, he opens up saying that. He opens up saying, as a man, I've been taught that like I'm the one in charge, that my opinions and my value is superior to that of women. And how he had to check himself because despite the fact that his dad was an abusive father, he grew up thinking that he wasn't going to be anything like him, but he really saw how his need to dominate would manifest itself in different ways. And so for him specifically to come forward after having had his own realization, that transformation, right, of like being a man who is just kind of unconsciously like performing masculinity, participating in the domination, for him to come around, have this happen, and control himself enough to be going the judicial route deserves so much acknowledgement and recognition, and it's incredible. It's incredible that we are being so resistant to this. Like, I mean, honestly, I have to ask, like, Remoy, you're, a man. And I do wonder, why do you think that people are being resistant to it? I mean, first off, what was your, gut reaction when you heard about this?
I mean, my gut reaction was, it's kind of what I've been saying. Like, it wasn't, I mean, I saw it happen, and I read about it on Twitter, and I've followed it. I've seen some of Terry's responses, some of his really poignant responses on Twitter, and so on and so forth. And my gut reaction is like, yeah, I mean, if you step back, it's just like a giant highlighter, and it's like highlighting like all of masculinity and its problematic issues and its problematic ways that it really holds us back as not as men but as humans to really like love one another or to be empathetic to one another or to really be supportive of one another, and not just of other, cisgendered men, but of anybody. Like,
yeah.
Like we've been taught, because the culture has kind of been pushing because of the power of the Me Too movement and everybody that's aligned with it, to be supportive of women. But why can't one man comes out and we can't be supportive of the man? So
literally one.
So
maybe the other guy who came out against Kevin Spacey, but besides that.
Right. And so why can't we be supportive? Again, it's like it's highlighting, like, it's the big picture, and we're seeing a highlighter just kind of just unearth like all these issues that are just the conditioned notions of what we subscribe to when we do like live a masculine life, and as we're born as traditional, or what we're born as potentially cisgender men, right? Or those who align as men or masculine. And so again, it's why this conversation that we're engaging in is so important, and it's why it's so important to have like a critical thinking and a critical lens when like looking at issues like this, because this is such a powerful story about how there are so many issues within masculinity, but then how there are heroes like Terry Crews and other men out there who are taking a stand and saying, look, I'm big, I'm physically strong, but I'm a father and I'm a husband and I'm all these things that are what you see as a traditional man, but I'm not going to rely on violence. And if I am sexually assaulted, I'm going to come up and talk about it. And I want to support others who've been through things like this, but I also want to hold people accountable, other men accountable, for their wrong actions and their wrong statements. And we're going to try to heal. I'm going to put myself out there almost sacrificially to help us all try to heal through this.
Yeah, again, and honestly, I guess when you're saying that, it's like, this is technically something that everybody should want, right? We all want to heal, we all want to get better, and I think that, by and large, most of us know somebody who has gone through something of the sort, right? Hence the power of the Me Too movement. So, I'm just wondering why the notion of masculinity and keeping up that performance of masculinity is so much more important to people than social justice. And I think that we have a hard time letting go of who we've been, right, to become who we want to be. But I also think that we're not really connected to the impact of the way that of this specifically. And I think there's also like a lack of understanding of the bigger picture, like how much people are actually dying because of it. Like when you hear like a parent, did you hear the story about these parents that like whipped the shit out of their son when they found out he was gay?
No.
They're like, your damn or some shit? Yeah. That. There's like the story about the young boy who his dad was scared that he was gay, so he asked his girlfriend to rape him. He was 12 years old or something like that. And it's just like, we don't realize that, like, okay, we could think of those as like a one-off, but those people then go through trauma that will most likely, as far as we know, in terms of the statistically, will not get dealt with. Then those people will be somebody that you're sitting with at work who will assault you, who you're sitting with at work, who will commit suicide, somebody that you're friends with or whatever, or your daughter becomes friends with, who will beat her. Like, people don't understand that these ramifications are things that will affect us all. And I just think it's a short-sighted thing, and I really think that if we become more connected to who we are as humans, and that we really focus on that healing that you're talking about, focus on that compassion, and also focus on being accountable for that healing and that compassion, then we can move forward. But until stories like Terry Crews's story and Amanda Newman's story, of course, by that token, are validated, not as like oh my God, abusers are awful, but let's talk about why this abuse is happening and keep those abusers accountable in a space of, like, as humans, right? Because they're humans too. Then we can move forward. Until then, someone like Terry Crews who's being brave, who's being vulnerable, who's being honest, who's calling himself out, can continue to get crucified for telling the truth, which is a bummer.
Well, I mean, I think it's a very complex like root system here, and we're trying to consistently pull it to the surface, and so we can all like look at it critically and thoughtfully together. And I think this is a very complex story in the sense, like we talked about earlier in this episode about, you know, the system of patriarchy that is focused on dominion and superiority and inferiority, right? And then you talked about trauma, and we talked about, you know, being a survivor of trauma, and then we talk about identity and all these things, right? And then, you know, we've talked about in the past, and I will talk about this ad nauseum in the sense that, you know, you can be a victim, but you can also be a victimizer, and the two are actually pretty closely related in experience, right? And they manifest at times that are very similar, and at times when you are victimizing someone, you're probably still subconsciously dealing with being the victim. So if we look at, like, you know, how Russell Simmons' reaction to Terry Crews is potentially, I don't want to, you know, oversimplify it, but as a black man growing up in this industry that was very, you know, white dominant, and Russell had to go through, I'm sure, incredible amounts of prejudice and discrimination to make it where he was. He went through a hell of a lot of trauma, and he was the victim. I can almost guarantee through many traumas, but then he perpetuates being a victim or victimizing onto Terry Crews. It's as simple as that. The victim can so easily and so willfully become the victimizer because of the system that is based on domination and inferiority and superiority. And we're just seeing it so profoundly. But what we're also seeing so profoundly is Terry Crews is saying, which is so, again, lack of a better term, profound, like he's stepping up to that, and he experienced the trauma, he experienced being a victim, but he said, I'm not going to be a victimizer. I'm not going to do that. And that is so incredible.
It's so incredible. It's so strong. It's so responsible. I think the responsibility of Terry Crews right now is something that's really not being addressed. And, like, who cares about responsibility? We're not living in a world where people care about responsibility. We're living in a world where people care about headlines. People care about money. And I'm complicit in that. You know, I'm on Instagram checking whatever else, you know, and that's how I stumbled upon this thing. So, you know, again, it's really about us keeping ourselves accountable and then keeping each other accountable too.
Yeah, I think accountability is the main thing for this conversation. We want to thank you all for joining us in this accountable conversation. We can't just be me and Sam talking about this in a fucking echo chamber, right? Like, it's about all of us and engaging with it and thinking of like new heroes like Terry Crews that help us hold us all accountable, setting a new standard. Like, there once was a dominant standard, like Samantha always says, right? But now he's challenging that and setting a new standard. So help us, engage with us in this conversation. Sam's always, like you said, doing the social media and the Instagram and the Facebook or whatever. I don't know how to do any of it, but she's posting all of that, and we're trying to get this conversation out there, and we need your help and support.
Yeah, we do. So please be sure to connect with us on that social media. That's Masculinity Pod on Twitter, but always with a K, of course. Masculinity Podcast on Facebook. Our email is masculinitypodcast@whoisceo.com. Feel free to send us email. We love to chat. Certainly, if you have any questions that you want us to answer on the show, send us those too, because we really would love to have listeners just engage and have us kind of interact with the things that they're thinking about when it comes to performance masculinity, and especially disagrees.
And yeah, give us 5 stars. Just do it. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
iTunes,
Exactly.
5-star.
Go on iTunes. Yeah, go on
Facebook,
SoundCloud,
I think you can do stars. Yeah, just star it up. 5-star, 10-star if you could.
Awesome, great, you guys. So thank you guys so much for listening to this conversation. Please let us know what you think. And until then, allez les bleus, allez les bleus, allez les bleus. That means go blue.
France, go. Go right. France, go.
All right, you guys. Thank you for listening. My name is Samantha and Remoy.
My name is Remoy George Philip. Be first.
And this has been Masculinity. Ciao.
Peace.